late one night at a crawfish boil. The boys got drunk and left a sack of oysters abandoned and forgotten. With one tea light candle, an oversized chainmail glove, an oyster knife, my co-founder shucked that entire sack of oysters. And I saw the beginning of a great party trick. 2 Girls, 1 Shuck is a full amenities traveling oyster bar. We bring raw and char-grilled oysters to the location of your choice. We want you to enjoy your own party, to socialize with your guests. We are the seamless shucking solution. Are you awake yet? If you saw the beginning of my slide, I am very playfully professional. As we go forward together here, forgive. I hope you enjoy. My name is Becky Wasden. I am an oyster shucker out of New Orleans, Louisiana. I did not open my first oyster until 2013. I started my company on a whim in 2014. And it just so happened that several things were churning in the industry at the same time. I took my full-time job as an oyster shucker in a new New Orleans Oyster Bar in 2015, where the first time I saw or heard of an oyster varietal. Let me caveat the fact that I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah, the most landlocked state probably in the entire nation. So seafood is new to me. I've been in New Orleans almost 20 years. But to handle an oyster and to see a Gulf oyster, which is what I was used to shucking, just a wild caught, big, meaty, rocky oyster. Some purveyors in New Orleans started to bring in East and West Coast oysters because they saw a trend, a national trend that started to shift in the industry. In 2015, I think I touched and saw my first Gulf farmed oyster. This was complicated for several reasons. People in New Orleans did not understand what this oyster was. Food writers did not know how to describe these oysters. I heard and read everything from exotic oyster, boutique oyster, genetically modified oyster, cultivated oyster, off-bottom grown oyster, cage-grown oyster, basket-grown oyster. Needless to say, my curiosity was piqued to a point that I couldn't sell these oysters at the oyster bar without knowing what I was selling. And somehow I found y'all. So, many of you are coming into this room from a different channel of seafood. You may have already or are continuing commercial fishing, crabs, clams, shrimp, but there is a reason why you are here today. I am not standing here today as a shucker, but I love shucking. I am here today as a buyer. 2 Girls, 1 Shuck buys upward of 100,000 oysters a year. Some of you in this room could sell me your entire stock. So as a buyer, I have questions, and I want answers. Why oysters? If you can't read the fine print, it says, boozy nights and strong women. I said this to Bill recently, and that was his response. Do you remember that? I should have told you I was going to throw you under the bus. No. I had taken a photo of an incredible sunrise down in Dauphin Island, and I sent it to Bill and Beth at 6 a.m., and I said, if we ever need a reminder why we do what we do. And Bill's response was, it's not boozy nights and strong women? But I do want to know why. As a buyer, I try to talk to as many growers as I can. I want to get to know you. I want to know your story. I want to know why. This is not an easy commodity. They are heavy. They are they're laborious. They are time sensitive. They are temperature sensitive. Why are we doing this, people? I'm going to tell you why. Oysters are alluring. Oh, insert fishing joke here. People are intrigued by oysters. They're mysterious. They are exotic. They are temperamental. They're desirable. They are very visceral. So here's my one little piece of biology you're gonna get. There is something innately visceral about an oyster. Not the fact that they grow in nature, they carry the characteristic of the location where they come from. One of the most distinct features, I think, people are so attracted to oysters because of that unique characteristic that each and every one of them bring to the table. They are hard on the outside and soft on the inside. You couldn't relate that anymore to a human being if you tried. Something about the oyster, we are drawn to it. One of the greatest gifts I have as an oyster shucker is the oration of people's oyster history. I cry every time I speak, just be ready for it. Every time I stand and shuck an oyster, someone tells me a story. It is a story of their grandfather shucking a sack of oysters on the front porch while a 4-year-old rides a tricycle round and round. One oyster for him, one oyster for her. It is the scars on people's hands that I have seen countless Mardi Gras drunken oyster shucking on the sewage grate stories. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. But most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, they're sexy as shuck. They just are. So as a buyer, we have to talk about the elephant in the room. It's not just an aphrodisiac. Oh, the puns are endless. The puns are endless. It's not just because they are an aphrodisiac. There is something so sexy about an oyster that the current national oyster trend is out of control. There are so many brand new oyster bars that have opened in New Orleans in the last 5 years, competing with currently owned oyster bars that have been there for centuries. Oysters are being paired with caviar. Oysters are being paired with champagne. Umi. Think of all these rich foods. People want to spend money on oysters. Why? Because they're feeling good about it. So I need you guys to feel equally as good about it. Who wants oysters? Entire room raises hands in unison. I want your oysters because I know who wants them where I am. But if you don't know the answer to this question, you've got to figure this out before you go any farther. If you've been growing for 20 years, I hope you know this answer. If you've been growing for a year, I really hope you know this answer. Because if you don't know who you are trying to sell, if you're going to spend, I'm going to try not to preach. If you're going to spend years of your life creating the perfect oyster and not know who is going to hold that product in the last 10 seconds of its life, this is the challenge I have for you. Now we're going to get into the good stuff. Size matters. Insert any innuendo here. The tale of two oyster farms. Once upon a time, I went to Grand Isle, Louisiana, and had an amazing time being hosted by an amazing farmer who was growing an incredible oyster. I loved it. I loved the oyster. I loved his story. Everything about that oyster made sense to me. It was from Grand Isle. It was perfect for who I wanted to sell this oyster to. And this gentleman said, no, I'm not going to sell you my oyster. I was flabbergasted. Why would he not sell me? Why? Why? This is Steve Pollock from Triple N. He said, you're not my market. I don't want to sell my oysters in New Orleans. I am selling every piece that I am growing to a restaurant in Baton Rouge called Jolie Pearl. They call their oyster the Jolie Pearl. And Becky, I am selling them a 3.5 to 4 inch deep cup farmed oyster that is the juiciest beefsteak oyster you have ever seen. Your market does not want my oyster. And he was right. He was right. And they're amazing oysters, Steve. But I'd never had a grower say no. Size matters. Grow a 4-inch oyster. Someone's going to buy it. Grow a 2-inch oyster. Someone else is going to buy that oyster. Consistency matters. I couldn't think of a good joke here. As a shucker and as a buyer, consistency in your product is everything. I'm extremely lucky that I get distribution sheets from several purveyors in New Orleans a couple of times a week. So I see a lot of your names on a list of 20 growers, 20 to 30 farms on a list. It is as boring as a Microsoft Word spreadsheet. It is a black and white email. There is no logo. There is no branding. There is a name and a price on a sheet. And as a buyer, I think to myself, last time I bought this oyster, what was my experience? What was my experience with the size, the consistency? Is it going to be the same as last time I got it? Is it going to feel the same when I shuck it? Is it going to taste the same when I test it? The story for this one, the tale of 2 oyster farms. I don't think they made it in the room. This is about Barrier Island Oyster Company in Charleston, South Carolina, who I met for the first time last year at the Symposium in Charleston. I was very eager to see an oyster farm when we were in Charleston, so I might have pushed that envelope a little bit. Barrier Island graciously brought some of us on a tour very last minute. It was the first tour they had ever given. They didn't tell us that till after. They are a young farm. They are in their 4th year, to probably technically 3rd year of production. I love their story. I love their product. I loved everything about them. And I said last February, when can I buy your oyster? Do you want to guess what they said? You can't buy our oyster. Because we are so small that we are hand delivering every piece of oyster to 5 high-end specialty oyster bars in Charleston. We are not ready to send our oyster to New Orleans. They were testing their consistency. They were testing their own market to see what the viability of the sea cloud was going to be. So I asked them last night, can I mention you in this presentation? And they said, yeah, of course, we would be honored. I said, so what's your answer this year? When can I buy your oyster? And Josh and Jared looked at each other and said, never say never. But we're pretty proud that we've added about 4 bars just in their local area in a year. They are still selling to under 10 locations. And we don't all have the luxury to walk into they're very land-based. They can walk into the restaurant, the back of the house, they can meet the chef, they can shake hands, and they can do samples. And I know that's not a capability of everybody here. But for now, I won't be seeing a sea cloud in New Orleans yet. Maybe in 5 years. I really encourage a long-term trajectory. When you think about your buyers, start small, start local, if you can, and expand as you can. As your farm grows and as your pieces grow, think about where you want to go with your oyster. Do you want to see your oyster in Seattle? Do you want to see your oyster in Australia? I think the sky's the limit. Just think big. Quality does matter, and spoiler alert about the upcoming panel, which is right after this. We're going to give you a shell full of info on that, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. Shuck ability matters because nobody likes a cluster shuck. Nobody. This is twofold. The shucking ability of the person that's going to handle your oyster. Who is the shucker? And imagine this. You just spent 2 years of your life cultivating the most amazing wine. You have a bottle of wine. It is the perfect wine. It is the perfect terroir. It's everything. And you hand it to a waitress. And she holds that bottle of wine and drops it. And it shatters on the ground. Most of the oysters I see improperly shucked make my heart sink like a destroyed bottle of wine. Second fold to this, the shuckability of your oyster. When you hold your oyster, what is the firmness of the shell? What is the brittleness? Is it adaptable? Is there a certain knife that you should recommend to a restaurant? Is there a certain piece of equipment, tools that help your oyster look its very, very best in that last 10 seconds of its life before you give the gift? It is a gift. And those great shuckers out there will make them look better than you could ever imagine. Who is your target market? This is not paid advertising by any big box retail stores with comparative name. Each of you should have a target. Targets are going to change over time. Oyster trends are changing constantly. You might have to conceptualize that your oyster will be paired on a tray with 4 other growers, 4 other farms, 6 other farms, 12 other farms. Be open to the fact that one thing oyster lovers adore is experiential differences between oysters. Salesmanship. I tried to be funny with that one, I don't know. See what I did there? A little double entendre? If you do not have a salesperson on your staff, if you do not have a sales person in mind at some point, think through this very carefully. As a small business owner, it is very hard for me to give the independence of representing my company to other people. As a grower, choose a salesperson that is as passionate and believes in your product as much as you do. If you cannot be the salesperson, we all wear too many hats already in this industry. We all do way too much than we should. But if you cannot afford a salesperson, find a distributor who believes in you and will be your sales piece. It's a big deal. I have some national distributors that I buy from, and I'm astonished at how some of them really, truly go to bat for certain farms because they taste everything. They touch everything. They also shuck a lot. So just think through your salesmanship. Bill says I have 5 minutes left, but this is really that's what I got for you. Get out there and raise some shell. You guys are amazing human beings. I am impressed that all of us are here at 9:30 in the morning. I hope y'all didn't stay out too late last night. I don't have any witty finale, but go out and find your clan or clams. No promises about other bad shellfish puns. Oh, wait. One very unofficial invite. If anybody's still in town, I'm going to Floribama to eat oysters this afternoon. They have bushwhackers. I think several people made it to Floribama Thursday night and last night, and I don't know if this is the afternoon party. Is what I'm trying to call it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Becky. That's awesome. I'm guessing somebody must have some questions for her. We do have some time. So any questions for Becky?
What time are we leaving?
So there's that Shellfish Growers Association meeting. I'm not going to that. That's supposed to end at 2:30. I will be eating oysters. Let's say a flexible 3-ish. Floribama's open till 2 a.m., so, just come on over. Oh, I'm staying here over tonight. I'm staying tonight. Anybody else? Oh, I love Supan. Yes, they do. They do have sunrise service in the morning. I've actually attended. It's a lot of fun. Thank you, John. John Supan said he's glad I brought up a knife or tools. I say to everyone, there are 1,000 ways to shuck an oyster, and I do it differently every single time. But I have 4 knives every time. Every single girl that works for me, I have 24 women that work for 2 Girls, 1 Shuck. We have 4 knives, a minimum of 4 knives in every single set of girls that I send with them. And a lot of them bring their own. Very true. That is true. So we've kind of blazed a trail for women shuckers in the city with a lot of great mentorship from some amazing old school shuckers. I've been very fortunate to have a lot of great mentorship over there. Yes.
Could you mention to everybody how you train your shuckers instead of trying to find good shuckers?
Sure. So this is Nicolette. She asked how I train my shuckers instead of find good shuckers. It's a combination of friends that I have worked with in the past, so I know their work history. Oftentimes it's a bartending or waitressing background, some kind of service industry background. That said, half of my girls come with some shucking experience. The training piece is completely hands-on. I encourage the ladies, I have a catering kitchen, they can come to my kitchen and practice shucking if we need to pre-shuck for char-grilled oysters. I have them come on site to an event, and they are never alone. Two Girls, One Shuck by design is you never have a single shucker. It is the shuck and jive. Part of the fun is the banter between two girls talking. Oftentimes there's good cop, bad cop. You know, one girl will be telling dirty jokes and smoking cigars on one, not behind the Oyster Bar, but, you know, like telling dirty jokes and smoking cigars with the boys on this side, and the other girl is talking to the soccer moms. So that's a big piece of it. But the training piece, it's all hands-on, and it's the open opportunity to touch as many different oysters as we can help with that. And it's over many months. Many months. So I don't just put a knife in a girl's hand and send them off to a job. So, long-term training. Yes, Andy? What was that?
What's your range? What's the farthest you go to?
Are you asking, or is my general liability insurance asking? Two Girls, One Shuck is based in Louisiana. All of my coverages, all my licenses, permits, and insurances are covered in Louisiana. That said, we have a lot of New Orleans expats in Mississippi post-Katrina who love oysters and miss having oysters. We try to stay within a 90-mile range. That said, that does cover Mandeville, Covington, Baton Rouge, Slidell. I have gone farther than that. We'll keep it simple right there.
Another innuendo by Becky. All right. Becky, why don't you stay on up here?